All right, so I just spent the last 30 minutes reading this chairman's letter to you guys. And OBS does this thing where it tells you it's recording. Like it grays out the button like you clicked it, but it doesn't actually start recording. So that's all gone. Unfortunately, that's kind of going to ruin my immediate surprise of this, but it's going to make it really easy for me to just summarize a lot of this stuff for you so you can get some of this really big time news that we just got dropped on our laps. So essentially, this starts out with a year in review of what's been going on in Star Citizen. I'm going to make a massive video about all of this, I think, over the next month or so. So, read this if you'd like. I'll drop the link in the video description. But there's a lot. There's a lot going on here. But we're going to jump right down to the road to 4.0, because that's where things get interesting. Now, what they do here is they basically explain the pillars that have been made to build Star Citizen. They mention that object container streaming was brought in back in 2019 on the server side in order to prepare for server meshing. They talk about persistent streaming, which is the most important thing that needs to be done for server meshing. It's been a huge pillar. I mean, they say right here, it's the foundational tech that enables server meshing. It's the hardest part of the work needed for server meshing, and it's the one that has required the most engineering. It's like such an important part of the game when they talk about Star Citizen actually becoming what it needs to be. When you want to think of crash landing your ship on a planet, and then that ship wreck persisting there so that your teammates can come in 2 days later and see where you crashed and see your objects that got scattered around. We're talking about when a player wants to go and attack a spaceship and they blow up that spaceship and all of the cargo bursts out from it and they want to tractor beam it up and sell it for themselves. We're talking about leaving a couple of ships off in somewhere in the countryside and starting a base and actually having a place where your org can constantly return to as a base. This is like super important tech. And they actually go through a little roadmap of server meshing and how it's developed over time. Super interesting. I'm not going to look and read through it all right now for you guys, but very big stuff. And you can see here that they're very close to getting a first build of persistent tech on the PTU, and they still want to get it out in the future, they say. It looks like the tech preview will be the end of the year, and we'll talk about that. They do mention that here. So if we go down below, they talk about the fact that the entity graph replaced iCache, which I think is really important because while we saw them switch the terminologies last year, this is essentially what will back up the whole game. They never explained why they switched from an iCache to an entity graph, what the super P cache is, all that stuff. So here they say, the development has not been without road bumps. We had to change our plans for how we would persist the state of the universe when we realized that the back-end relational database we were planning on using with host services, which we had collectively dubbed iCache, would likely not be able to have low latency at the scale we needed for the number of concurrent players we will need to support in the future. So they pivoted to a graph database, which they call the entity graph, which you can see more about at last year's Citizencon video. And it uses something called the replication layer. Again, something you can see in that video, or my own, which I'll link down below. These things essentially will allow the game to save the state of any object anywhere. Planet, space, ship, city, save it, even if the server and the client crash. So 30Ks, regular client crashes, signing off for 2 months, those things, as far as I'm understanding from this, won't be wiped out. This creates the actual persistent game that is Star Citizen and allows us to start building up a real living game space, essentially. And I think it also is kind of obvious that with this kind of stuff coming in, they're going to try and wipe less and less. They want people to start thinking of this stuff as more permanent. So for that persistent streaming to work, both the entity graph and replication layer need to be functional. In terms of engineering, it has been the biggest technical challenge and required a fundamental reworking of how the game handles authority and state changes of entities. In addition, a whole host of new online services were needed to support the replication layer and the entity graph. To support PES, we needed to create 12 new services. For server meshing, only 4 more services are currently planned. So you can see just how much fundamental tech for server meshing is in PES. And this is kind of funny. So as a part of the switch, they switched to gRPC, which is an open source Google sponsored data protocol. And the funny thing is they say here, the nice aspect of using the tech like this is that it is designed to scale, and there are lots of available third-party tools and code compared to creating an internal custom protocol. And everybody knows they like to create their own internal stuff, you know, building blocks, entity graph, server meshing. Obviously, it's not just them, but they like to try and come up with new ways to create this stuff. So the fact that they're taking somebody else's protocol means this stuff must be good. All right. So this is actually the coolest statement, biggest part of this whole thing, I think, in my opinion. I am happy to report after 16 months of extremely focused work by 18 engineers, 3 dedicated QA, and 4 producers spread across CIG and Turbulent, the team were able to demonstrate persistent entity streaming. This is like, we've all been under the impression that this is doable. And we've all been waiting years and years to hear that server meshing is actually going to happen, but it's nice to finally know that they have something working. It's not server meshing per se, but it is the most important part of server meshing. Paul Reindel, our director of engineering for online tech, spun up a server, populated the entity graph to its initial state along with the replication layer, then connected to a client, placed down a series of small objects like cans on the surface of Aberdeen, along with an 890 jump and an anvil arrow. He then killed the server and the client. The server was restarted. We did not populate the entity graph, and then connected a client. Warped to Aberdeen, and everything was there as he placed it. I hate how that was written, but it worked. This was a huge milestone as the state of the universe was recorded to the back-end database, and then when he restarted the server, it just connected to the replication layer, which had initialized itself from the database. This is really good. This is great stuff. So it's a huge leap. Very, very good to hear. Server meshing is making good progress, and they start talking a little bit more about how it's going to happen this year. So first, they're going to start testing persistent entity streaming. That's going to be happening in 3.18, surprisingly. It's going to go out to Evocati and PTU, but the phases are going to be 3 months this time. So we shouldn't expect to get 3.18 to live until later on in Q3. Probably like August to September-ish time. Oh my gosh, it better not drop when I'm away. But that is a big deal, yes, but I think it's also good that they're willing to extend the PTU phase so that people who want to enjoy the live game that still works can, while they continue to get this all working, because there's going to be a lot of crap going on when they start bringing in persistent entity streaming. I mean, even here they say, for instance, will the universe turn into a nightmare version of WALL-E because everyone just throws empty boxes on the ground or dumps the 10 AI bodies they have looted in New Babbage's commons? They know that we're crazy and we're going to break the game, and they know that it's going to take a long time to figure out the bugs behind the persistent entity streaming. So they're giving themselves a good amount of time. The goal will be 2 to 3 months of testing on 3.18 and PTU for an alpha 3.18 release to live in late Q3. So yeah, it does say here, we do not want engagement and content to stall because of PES, so we are planning to release a content-rich 3.17.2 with known stable code, new missions, new locations, and other gameplay late in June. So we're still going to be getting something. This is just a good chance for them to hold what's important and what needs to be tested. It'll be interesting to see if they decide to use this as an excuse to... Actually, no, I'm sorry. They say later on down here, where is it? They mentioned that cargo hauling, here it is. I know many of you have been waiting for Salvage physicalized cargo, confirmed in 3.18, and persistent entity streaming for a long time, and I'm excited to see us in the home stretch for them, but we won't be getting them until actual 3.18. So... we know that physicalized cargo, salvage, and persistent streaming won't be in 3.18. They won't be in 3.17.2. They'll be in 3.18, probably in like September-ish. And that's because those are things that were built with the streaming. To be quite honest, the cargo factor might not have even been possible without the entity streaming. So I'm not surprised that they built it in that way. But yeah, that's big news. That's not the end of it either. We're going to keep going. Server meshing is planned to go into Evocati by the end of the year. And they're also saying that the majority of Gen 12 will in fact be released in 3.18 as well in the live, with the release of Vulkan functionality hopefully by the end of the year, which is honestly, I did not think that they were at that stage. Vulkan by the end of this year would be way faster than I thought. I thought we'd be waiting until next summer for Vulkan, to be honest. So that's good. This should do a lot to help with the game performance. It should also hopefully open the gates for this game to be more playable on Linux and stuff like that. Now we keep going. Star Citizen 4.0. They're talking about server meshing, which they're starting with static server meshing, as they said. And once that is done, they'll move towards dynamic server meshing. With 4.0, we'll get our second system, Pyro. And we'll be adding more... It'll begin the process of adding more and more content, gameplay, and polish to get us to beta. I do think that we're going to see a speed up in content from here on out. Like I said, we're in phase 4. They're getting a lot of the good stuff done that they needed to on the back end. And at this point, the locations teams are doing great. The planet teams are on point. The AI teams are developing a lot of really good stuff that we don't get to see because of server performance. Really, all we're waiting for is like narrative and missions to get picked up. And I think now that they've got this kind of figured out, it's going to open... They had like a catalog this big, right, of stuff that they could shove into the game without breaking it. I feel like with server meshing, even static server meshing, after a few quarters of them getting used to it, they're going to feel more like they have a space this big to fill up. They're going to be able to do more things. They're going to be able to bring in the mission givers they stopped doing in 3.19. They're going to be able to bring in things like Salvage, which required tracking of ships on planets and things like that, materials. So I do think that this is going to make a speed up in content. I don't think it's just going to happen like that, but we're going to notice it. We're going to notice it for sure. So because of this, because of the way they're doing all this streaming, they want to have Ivacati, like I said, testing it in the PTU by the end of Q4 this year. So they're laying it out for us right now. Pyro and server meshing will not be in the game this year. It's going to Ivacati at the best by the end of the year. And there's even a good chance that it will slip all the way into Q1. So in order to get server meshing actually out on the server live, the earliest they can expect is, let's see, end of Q1 2023. So there you go. People in the PTU will be able to try it out. Same way that people in the PTU will be able to try out persistent streaming this summer before everybody else gets to in September. But in terms of a live server, when everyone's going to be experiencing the actual beginning of Star Citizen's real game, the actual MMO of it, won't be until at least Q1 of next year. They say they're still having 4 big quarter releases, but like, I mean, 3.18 to Ivacati, I'm guessing they're going to do another type of thing where they release some content in December and then leave the server meshing on PTU. I don't know. Let's see that they've talked about more content coming in later in this year, another run of Xenothreat, updates to Jumptown, new dynamic events, additional locations, points of interest, and then also by the end of the year, persistent entity streaming, Salvage, Cargo Refactor, Bounty Hunter V2, which means we will also have some form of tracking system. Likely we will have security systems in cities, and it could also mean that we have the ability to track virtual AI using Quantum, which is the virtual economy simulator. What they don't mention here are new outposts, hacking gameplay, what else? Engineering gameplay. So I would not expect those things this year. They might have shuffled them around. And then we get into kind of talking more about like what's the plan for the future of the company. They're talking about how they got a new office in Manchester, which is here, that they're building up. It's a really nice freaking office, brand new, tons of space. They got great deals on them because of COVID. And then there's also the Frankfurt office, which they are also going to move into later this year, which is even nicer. And at the top of, literally up here, like, they're in a high rise. This is, it's like a major, they're straight up doing major publisher stuff. Not that it's a bad thing. I think, if anything, what this tells us, on top of the fact that they are expanding to 840 people just this year alone, that they're hiring 168 people over the course of the year, and already 128 this year alone. The fact that they are just doing, they're looking to expand their Austin studio next year, as well as their LA studio. On top of these moves, this is going from the Star Citizen developer to much more. This is way more than Star Citizen and 3 episodes of Squadron 42. They've built an engine. They've built a huge following. They have over 800 employees. They're going to go so much further than Star Citizen with this. And it's interesting to see. I do hope that they continue to really put most of their effort into what's going on now and not look at the future too much. Obviously, they have to look at the future for Star Citizen, but I'm excited to see how they're expanding. I hope that they handle this correctly. I really do. This could be very, very, very good for all of us, or it could be bad. The next section is talking about Citizencon, basically mentioning that they're still not ready to schedule one. COVID still has some interesting things. They were planning on hosting this out at LA, but unfortunately, it's too uncertain. LA does a lot of restrictions, and it's going to be winter time, kind of October, getting into that period. So they want to be careful. And honestly, they've got a lot of work going on. They're just not going to do it. In fact, they go even further to say that there won't be a gameplay demo. And this is basically because they don't want to pull the resources away from the game development team who's working on the persistent streaming and the Gen 12 and server meshing and all that. An argument that people have made in previous years. Why do you guys do a gameplay demo and set all this stuff up if it takes away from the development? Mainly it's because it's a hype event. It gets people very excited for what's coming in the next couple of years of the game, and I know we're going to have people saying, but that stuff doesn't come into the game. The little things do. Deal with it. Not the sandworm, whatever. Not like people walking on and off ships. Yes, that was navigation mesh. Unfortunately, it's still not here. But there are things that come into the game. Loot boxes from the Citizencon demo last year came into the game. The medical system, the backpacks, the clouds are there. Actually, I think clouds are already in there. So there are things that they show. It's just sometimes not that general idea gets in there fast enough. Regardless, it's a hype event, and they're canceling it. And if I had to say there was a reason why they would cancel that, I think it's because they have enough confidence in the current game, or at least the game we'll be playing at that time, that they don't need to sell us on future gameplay anymore. They just need to show us, hey, we've got good gameplay here, so you can expect more to come, you know? We've finally gotten to that point in this phase 4 of Star Citizen development that the game is starting to speak for itself. And I think that's part of why we have big YouTubers playing, we have more press coming in, we have more players joining. It's kind of starting to come together for them. And I think they don't feel as much pressure to show, but it could look like this anymore. And that's good for them. So instead of Citizencon, they're going to do a Bar Citizen World Tour. I'll let you read more about this. For those of you who are going to come to our Bar Citizen, I will give you an update on what's going to happen there since Citizencon is canceled. But we'll figure something out. And then final thoughts. You can expect to see Invictus Week moving into the clouds of Crusader, the promise of persistent entity streaming making its way to the verse, as well as a big game-changing features like Salvage, Physicalized Cargo, Bounty Hunter V2, new events and missions, enhancements to Jumptown. Ships I know you're waiting on, like the Corsair, Vulture, and Hull C. Ooh. Oh ho ho ho. Well, there you go, folks. He's definitely not trying to say the Merchantman's coming this year. Because you know for a fact that would have been in this list. So, let's set our expectations based on this letter, huh? Don't expect a Merchantman this year. As well as more quality of life and new player onboarding improvements. I think this might partially be the visor system. It'll make it more playable and welcoming. I think if they can fix the visor system, the star map, and the way we interact with things, this game will be much more playable for casual players. They just need to communicate more to the player of what's going on. Let's see. Think you would all rather be playing this new content than hearing about it, of course. Without our publishing and live ops teams, the servers would not be up 24/7 in the cloud, and you would not be able to download or play Star Citizen. Without our quality assurance teams, tireless testing and feedback, Star Citizen would be unplayable. Without the backend and web teams at Turbulent, you would not be able to log on, have a website to read news and information, or a forum to participate in... or a forum to participate in healthy debate on. Pledge or launch Star Citizen. Without our studio experience team looking after the health of our organization, there would not be a creative environment as ambitious as Star Citizen. Without our finance and legal teams, we could not have built a company as unique and groundbreaking as CIG and figured out the best way to sell ships. I'm kidding, I added that in there. Without our marketing community teams, there would not be any communication about our plans. No dazzling trailers to tease and excite and FOMO you all about future content, and no real back and forth between the community and CIG. And without, I'm just going to skip the rest of this. IT team, we love you. Player experience team, we love you. I know some of you, we love you. Customer support, thank you all so much for what you do. Your people department, seriously, people don't give enough credit for how much this is not just a team of people making a game. It's a full-on business and company that needs to factor in salaries and paid time off and injuries and like running multiple departments. They're doing a decent job. They haven't collapsed, so I think they're doing all right. That being said, they better meet these expectations they're setting with this letter. We'll come back to this at the end of the year. As we move closer to achieving the critical milestones outlined above, we cannot help but feel an immense amount of appreciation for each and every one of you who shares in the collective dream of Star Citizen. The path ahead is more vibrant than ever, but in some ways the collective journey together, the moments and fun that people have along the way as we build Star Citizen together, is as rewarding as the ultimate destination. Guys, this has been your reading of the letter from the chairman. We'll just call it 400 million, because why not? I'm gonna go and read through this much more deeply and make a video for this. Probably come out late June, early July. It's gonna take a lot of writing and planning, but this is a great update to what's going on in the game and all of these big pillars. Hope you enjoyed this read through. I don't know why I did it. I thought it would help people who don't feel like reading. And if you like this, consider coming to the live streams. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Monday, Wednesday, Saturday. Check it out, 9 a.m. PST. Love you all. Have a good one.